if there's anyone who's a weirdo about Halloween, it's this little guy. Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Jason White and this is Jason's Weird Reads. Thank you for joining me. In this video, I'm going to be talking about some books, horror books, that are great to read during the autumn months. So this includes Halloween, but is not exclusive to Halloween. And the reason why I say that is because actually I've had this video planned for a few weeks now, and I'm just getting to record it now. But on the morning of me recording this, I got a comment on one of my older Halloween videos, and I'll leave a link to the playlist up there or down there. And it said that they liked how I talk about actual Halloween books and not books that remind them of either the autumn or Halloween, regardless of whether or not an autumn book or not. And there's a lot of that in this list. And there's a reason for that. It's because I've been influenced by some booktubers who've done some, now I hate saying this word, autumnal. I hate that word. Autumnal books. And not all of these videos have been horror books, but there have been some videos that have had horror books as, you know, an autumn reading list. And so what I thought I would do with this is I'm going to split it up between some books I've read that I think are great for autumn. And like I said, not all of them even take place in autumn, or maybe they just have one part that takes place in autumn. But they give me autumn feels regardless. And I'm going to have a list of books that I want to read because I haven't yet. So let's get into it, shall we? The first book I have here is Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. This one is probably an obvious, you know, it's been a long time since I've read this. And the funny thing about this book is it really gives me the feels that a lot of people talk about when they talk about Boy's Life by Robert R. McCammon. I'm going to say something a little controversial here, and I like Boy's Life. It's a good book, but I don't understand the hype because, to me, Robert McCammon was showing his influences on his sleeve. And I'm not saying he ripped off Ray Bradbury. He did not rip off Ray Bradbury. But his Ray Bradbury influence is on his sleeve with Boy's Life. And Something Wicked This Way Comes is a very, very big example of I'm pretty sure a book that Robert McCammon loved when he was a kid. But Something Wicked This Way Comes, I read when I was a lot younger, and I loved it. I haven't read it since, so I should add this into the list of books I want to reread. And I might, because there is a book that I'm going to be reading with Rachel from Shades of Orange. I'm a member of her Patreon club, her book club. In October, we are going to be reading The Halloween Tree, and so by Ray Bradbury, obviously. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I'm going to listen to it this time on audiobook, and I might pair it up with Something Wicked This Way Comes. All right, so the next book I'm going to talk about is a book I've talked about before, and I kind of wanted to avoid this, but this book really hit the theme of what I'm trying to get to in this video, in that these stories are all set in autumn, but there's maybe 8 short stories in this collection, but only 1 or 2 actually take place on Halloween. Maybe 3. Not very many, but all the rest, they're all autumnal stories. So that's Dead Leaves by Keelan Patrick Burke. I read this about 2 years ago, and I want to give it a reread as well because it's very well done. And it was a lot of fun to read. Don't go into this expecting a lot of explosions, though. When I say it was fun to read, it was I have fun when the language used is somewhat poetic without being purple. And I think Keelan Patrick Burke does this masterfully with his books, and Dead Leaves is no exception. This is a book, the next book here is one that I read recently for the first time. I can't remember, it was last year. I think I might have read it in November or December. And this book would fit very well with a Christmas reading if you want to read some Christmas horror. but I think it works very well for, you know, an autumn reading as well. If I do a Christmas, I've been thinking about doing a Christmas horror list. I think I might add this book in there. Not to be repetitive, but because I think it fits very well. And that is The Woman in Black by Suzanne Hill. This book is very dreadful and it's actually very creepy. I loved listening. I listened to the audiobook. I'd like to read it with my eyes just to see what my brain, how it would translate. And just the dreary scenery, the rain, I think it actually takes place during Christmas at one point, so I could be wrong on that. I might be thinking of something else, but it just has that sort of fall to early winter feel, and it's very rainy and muddy and dreary, and there's a haunting, and it's a great book. I think I talked about this book before, and I called it sort of like a spin-off of Dracula, in a sense, because you have like a lawyer coming to an estate where the person died, and he's actually, I think it's a real estate agent of some sort, and he's there to take care of some business. I don't remember the exact particulars, but everyone in the village around this house, like, don't go there. You don't want to go there. But he goes there anyway, and he goes there, and he's changed forever because of the things that are happening inside that house. It's very sort of a Jonathan Harker story-esque going on there, I think, that nobody really talks about. I don't know why, because I noticed that right away, and who knows, maybe I'm wrong. Salem's Lot is my next one by Stephen King. This one I read for the first time during the fall. It was like 2009 or 2008 when I read it. And every time I think of Salem's Lot, I think actually most of it takes place during the summer, but I always pictured it when I'm remembering it as late summer, early fall. It just gives me the Halloween vibes, mostly I guess because of the town, and I think maybe Halloween appears in there. I'm not entirely sure. I should give it a reread. I want to listen to the audiobook because I hear it's fantastic. So whenever I think of Salem's Lot, I think of autumn. And you know what? I'm not the only one to put this on this list, and I was surprised because when I was making my list, I watched some more videos, and Salem's Lot appeared on those people's videos, and I was like, okay. There might be some kind of weird synchronicity, Carl Jung's theory of synchronicity happening there. The next book's actually made some lists too, but it's an obvious one, and yes, it is a children's book, but it's written by a master. Well, actually, I guess that's derogatory towards other writers. I apologize, but this writer he's like, oh my God. And of course, I'm talking about Neil Gaiman. I'm talking also about the Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. This book, as you may well know, is about a kid who's raised by ghosts in a graveyard. And that is, I absolutely loved it. Because of books like this, I've been more interested lately in reading more middle grade horror books, because there's a lot of interesting things and more lighthearted, even though it takes on very dark topics. I don't know if that makes sense, but middle grade has a way of taking very dark topics and turning them into something a child can understand. Neil Gaiman is a master at doing whatever he decides to do. I might give this a re-listen at some point too, or at least a reread. I might listen to it on audiobook, especially if he narrates it, but stick around to what I want to read, because there's more Neil Gaiman coming up. Next up, I have The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I believe this one does take place in the fall, and it's your typical. It's not a typical haunted house story. It's very much psychological horror. But there's a booktuber who said that this book isn't very scary, and I would like to disagree, because there's parts of this book and the movie adaptation, not the recent one from the 1990s, not that one. I'm talking about the one, I think, that was shot in 1960, somewhere in the 1960s. That one's scary. It's in black and white, and there's like this weird smashing sound that happens in the middle of the night. If you're watching this in the dark, at night, in the middle of the night. It's gonna scare it. At least it scared me. There's something similar in the book that because I saw that adaptation before having read the book, and it just brought back the fear that the movie put into me. So The Haunting of Hill House is very much a good fall read. It has it just has the elements that make you think of autumn. And next up, I want to mention some classic horror, because I jokingly put in my notes here that all classic horror was written for the fall and winter. Because I think a lot of it takes place in the fall and winter. There's not too many classic horror, at least I'm kind of stuck on the idea right now as I talk about this, of classical horror stories being in the fall. But there's probably plenty that are in the summer or the spring. But so what I have here is I want to talk about the ghost stories of M.R. James. I find that M.R. James is a great he's a great ghost story writer. Algernon Blackwood is a favorite older horror writer of mine, but sometimes his ghost stories are just like, they kind of miss the mark. Like, oh my god, we saw a ghost, and that's sort of like the punchline of the story. M.R. James can have stories sort of like that, but I don't know, he seems to go a little bit deeper. I would say read the actual collection, the ghost stories of M.R. James. I don't think I've read them all myself, but the ones I have read are very, very autumnal, and I highly recommend them. And going with my theory with The Woman in Black and it being a Dracula type story, just reminiscent of Jonathan Harker's being a guest of Dracula's Castle, I'm gonna add Dracula by Bram Stoker, because Dracula is an awesome book, and I think that a lot more people need to read this book who haven't. I don't think it's necessary for you to read it and call yourself a horror fan necessarily, but this book isn't what you think it is. If you've seen all the adaptations and you haven't read the book, it's a very different beast. Sort of like Frankenstein. There's absolutely no adaptation of Frankenstein that is the same as the book. I think there's some movies that adapted Dracula that are closer to the storyline of Dracula, but it's still a very different beast, and it has all the autumn feels to it. It's a perfect time to read Dracula, because this is where, it's not where horror started or even vampire fiction started, but I think it's sort of what sort of kick-started it into people's imaginations a little bit more because of its popularity. All right, now we're going to go into the list of the books I want to read. I've had this book on my shelf for far too long, and it's House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. And I was actually invited to do a read-along with this, with Coffee Over Apples, I believe her channel name is. And I had to turn it down because I just have too many things on my plate right now, and I just don't have time to be putting this puzzle piece, because this book is a puzzle piece, in there. It's like 600 pages long, and some parts are very, well, I guess some parts, like some of the pages here, and you know, there's like story within a story. This book's a bit of an onion. It has a huge footnote sideline story that goes on in here, and I've been wanting to read this book for far too long. I really love the premise. It has like a strong weird fiction feel to it, maybe even Lovecraftian horror, in that I would say cosmic horror, not Lovecraftian, in that a man, I don't know if he moves into the house, but he figures out that his house is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, and some very strange things start to happen with reality. I've heard this book's pretty scary, and I did read once the first 100 pages, and it gave me autumn feels. I think I might have tried to read it in the autumn. The reason why I put it down is because I was just too daunted by the size of it, and I had like other things I needed to read. It's like 10 years ago when I tried reading it, and I've been meaning to pick it up again ever since. And so I definitely want to read House of Leaves. moving on to what I was talking about before, Neil Gaiman. I want to read Caroline, because this is, I've seen the movie and I love the movie, and it has all the autumn feels to it, but I really like the idea of the story, and I want to listen to the audiobook of this because Neil Gaiman narrates, and I absolutely love listening to Neil Gaiman narrate his own work. You know, this book is another one that's been a long time coming for me. I don't even know why I haven't read this one yet, because it's so short. I bought the audiobook recently, and it's like 3.5 hours long. That's an afternoon if I have an afternoon free, which actually never happens, but I think you get the idea. So Caroline is about a young girl whose parents are somewhat neglectful of her, and she finds like I believe a tunnel somewhere that leads to an alternate reality where her parents have like buttons for eyes, and but they act really nice towards her, but there's something sinister lurking beneath their, you know, kindliness towards her. I would love to read this book or listen to this book and then watch the movie and see how they differ. Next up, I already mentioned this one, is The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury. I'm going to be listening to the audiobook of this for Rachel's her Patreon book club's read along in October, and I'm looking forward to that. I bought the audiobook, obviously, for this as well, and I can't wait to dig in, honestly. I don't know why I haven't read this one. It's just one of those ones that just sort of slipped by, and but you know, it's something that I should have read because it's Ray Bradbury, and it has Halloween in the title, Halloween Tree. Yeah, I don't understand either. All right. Just 2 more here, and I shall let you guys go. Actually, 3 more, because I want to talk about Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I've seen a few of the adaptations for this, and this is by Washington Irving. It's a classic piece of fiction, and it's definitely autumnal. My favorite adaptation is
Came back to clean the head.
The Tim Burton adaptation. It's just beautiful movie, beautifully shot, and it's fun to watch. So yeah, I don't think I need to really go over the plot points or the plot of that one. Next up are a couple more children's books or middle grade books that I want to read. I was talking about Goosebumps books before. About a year ago, I was reviewing one, and this one kept coming up. They said this is a really good Halloween one, and it's The Haunted Mask by R.L. Stein, Goosebumps book. I've been wanting to read it ever since. Like, I think more than one person recommended this, and I found this at the used bookstore, and I was so happy to find it because these are hard to find. It's like one of the original covers. It's the original cover. I don't know if it's like first printing or anything like that, but it is the original cover, and that's what I wanted. And keeping with Goosebumps, this is actually a really thick book for a Goosebumps, and I don't know if it's any good, but I'm going to give it a go. And it's Goosebumps Horrorland, Weirdo Halloween. And if there's anyone who's a weirdo about Halloween, it's this little guy. Oh. Weirdo Halloween, I have no idea what it's about. It's after a trip to Horrorland, Meg and her brother Chris can't wait to celebrate Halloween until that weirdo in the baby alien costume shows up and begins to wreak havoc on their lives. They just can't seem to get him to leave, and Meg's beginning to suggest that his orange skin isn't a Halloween disguise. What happens in the world's scariest theme park on the most frightening day of the year? Meg is about to find out when she's mysteriously called back to Horrorland on Halloween. Can she survive the trick or treachery? So that sounds really interesting, and I'm pretty sure everyone knows what this one's about because it was adapted to the Goosebumps TV show, and it's a pretty popular Halloween book for Goosebumps fans. But if you don't know what it's about, how ugly is Carly Beth's Halloween mask? It's so ugly it almost scared her little brother to death. So terrifying that even her friends are freaked out by it. It's the best Halloween mask ever. It's everything Carly Beth hoped it would be, and more. Maybe too much more, because Halloween is almost over. and Carly Beth is still wearing that special mask. Ooh. It's actually a part 2 and maybe a part 3 of this. So that is my autumn horror reading. And yes, there's some middle grade in there. I apologize for that for people who, for some reason, can't stand, you know, that kind of stuff. This is little Sammy. We got him for our son Keenan, and Keenan's the one who named him Sammy, and he is a little terror, let me tell you. But he's also lovable. All right, thanks for watching, everyone. If you made it this far, please leave a pumpkin in the darkness, deep down in the darkness, and I will leave you a pumpkin in return. All right, thanks everyone for watching. Keep being safe, keep being productive, and I'll catch you guys in the next bookish video.